Hey everyone, it's Drew here. I'm recording in lieu of presenting in class today because I'm out of town. So Corey and I worked on the CREATES Act. I'll do the overview and I'll also be covering the opposition to the bill. And then Corey will present information on support of the bill. So before I jump into covering the bill, I wanted to briefly go over some of the sources that Corey and I used to develop our arguments, some opinionated sources as well as objective information that kind of brings it all together. So The Hill is a bipartisan media outlet. The Washington Times generally leans more liberal. Forbes is more of a conservative outlet, and then everyone's familiar with NEJM since we're in healthcare, and United States Senate was the source for the bill text. The acronym for CREATES stands for Creating and Restoring Equal Access to Equivalent Samples Act of 2018. So the bill is number 974 that was introduced in the Senate. And the primary objective of this bill is to promote competition in the market for drugs and biological products by facilitating the timely entry of lower cost generics and biosimilar versions of those drugs and biological products. The bill sponsor is Senator Patrick Leahy, a Democrat from Vermont. And interestingly enough, he's a fan of the Grateful Dead, and he had a cameo in The Dark Knight, which is one of my favorite movies. So I like him a little bit more now. But this bill is a health bill, and he primarily sponsors law and enforcement, agriculture, and commerce. So it's a bit, health is amongst his lowest covered policy areas. So it's interesting to see that he was the one to garner the support to get this to the floor. This bill was drafted in 2017, and it has been on the legislative calendar since mid-June of last year. There's some word that it may be on the floor again soon. In an interview with the American Journal of Managed Care, Michael Brzezinski, the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Association for Accessible Medicine, is quoted saying, "A more significant appetite is seen in the new Congress for acting on drug pricing, and as a result of this, expects the new sitting Congress to take up the CREATES Act." With the momentum behind the bill right now, there's no better time to be talking about who is a proponent, who's in opposition, and how to make sense of it all. So on the conservative side, senators include Ted Cruz and Mike Lee of Utah, and on the liberal side of the bill, in support, Dianne Feinstein, Sherrod Brown, and Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Along with this, there are think tanks and political action committees that support it as well. Public surveys were also conducted that indicate the public is in support of improving drug prices, to no one's surprise. So in opposition of the bill, we have the Pharma Political Action Committee, or the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. And they argue that the controversy centers around the REMS program and the elements to assure safe use of drugs that are high risk. So that will be discussed further as Corey and I move along. All right, get out your big pharma hats. We're going to shut this bill down with our $10 million sum, and it'll be a wrap. So one of the reasons why the big pharma is in opposition of this is relating to the loss of exclusivity for their patent samples. So now generic companies can file a civil action lawsuit to access their samples in a timely fashion. You could see why this would, they're willing to spend $10 million to save $50 million or $100 million to have more time as the only drug in market, a drug monopoly. So naturally this bill would reduce their profits, and the crux of their defense is centered around the safety risks involved in drugs that have REMs with ETASU programs, which require more clinical monitoring and whatnot. So I'll discuss in detail these 3 bullet points. As I covered in the previous slide, the patented information can be sued for, and it gets kind of murky because you can't ensure that what's being done is focusing on drug pricing. The costly litigation and all the lawsuits kind of take away from focusing on the true problem, which is getting drugs to market that are fair and equitable. And passing this bill doesn't directly drive prices down, because there are unique cases that I'll show you in a second that can impact whether or not a generic is more expensive or cheaper when it comes to market. This graph is courtesy of the Duke University Margolis Center for Health Policy. So I came up with a use case to prove that you should oppose this bill. Suppose that the green plot right here, so on the y-axis we have price, and on the x-axis we have time. Suppose that the green plot, the green line that's plotted, is a smaller brand company, an instance where when the drug goes to market, they will no longer be able to compete with a big generic company like Mylan or Endo Pharmaceuticals. So on the orange plot down here, we have a low-cost competitor that could sell the drug below market price to drive the smaller brand company out of business, because they can no longer compete with, on cost. It's a matter of scale, the economic scale that a $10 billion company can produce a drug at versus a $10 million company. So you may have seen this case in the news before. I think his name was Martin Shkreli, when he purchased the patent samples for Daraprim, which is a toxoplasmosis drug, I believe, or anti-malaria. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Dugan or Paige can chime in on that. But one of the reasons why this isn't the solution to lowering drug prices is that at this equilibrium right here, when you have no more competitors, generics are almost treated like a brand, in that the price is it has no limit or has no bound when competitors get driven out of the market, and then barriers of entry to the market are difficult to overcome. Lastly, I'll discuss the REMs with ETASU. 2/3 of the current REMs drugs have additional elements to assure safe use, and they are loosely defined as drugs that require close monitoring, like blood work, lab draws, panels, adherence measures, just to ensure that patients are optimizing their therapy. If you'd like, now would be a good time to pause the video to read this and perhaps discuss the language and what it means, and I'll follow up on my next slide. Okay, so the best defense against passing this bill for pharma regarding the REMs program is if the drug samples get into the hands of a generic manufacturer that can't handle the capacity necessary to handle the clinical monitoring and the patient safety risks that come along with distributing a drug that is in the REMs program. With that being said, if this bill does get passed, it may incentivize manufacturers with proprietary information to attempt to enroll their drugs into the REMs with ETASU program. And the reason they would do this is because it would extend the period of time that they could prevent generics from accessing their patented drug samples. So you could see in the first bullet point, the secretary has 4 months to get back to the generic company that submits an ANDA or an ANDA. It's better than the current legislation, which is non-regulatory at all, and if you have patented or proprietary information, you don't have to sell it at a fair price. But 4 months is still a long time when you consider, the world of drug revenues. So it's hard to say, which side is best. And it may also have some unintended consequences as well. By enrolling drugs into the REMS program, it could create more cognitive burden for direct care providers, and it could also hamper accessibility for patients too that can't handle keeping up with the program. So, it's for this reason the CREATES Act may not be the best solution to lower drug prices, and there's still workarounds for powerful brand manufacturers to avoid the legislation, or delay it at the least. And it's still leaving power in the hands of people with the license and the proprietary information. So Corey now will discuss some of the support.